Sometimes life hands you a day that's supposed to be just routine, a mundane Tuesday in the city, but then it takes a hard left turn, throws you through the windshield, and suddenly nothing is ever routine again. For me, that day started just like any other, busy, loud, and frankly a little dull, at the Aviation Parkway Terminal in Oak Haven. I'm Seth Donovan, a K-9 officer with the Metro Transit Unit, and my partner is a German Shepherd named Zeus. 5 years we've walked those cold, massive granite floors. 5 years of smelling forgotten coffee, old socks, and occasionally a bag of questionable herbs. Never anything big. We were the face of comfort, the silent protectors folks smiled when they dragged their luggage past, a reassuring blur in the everyday chaos. Zeus, a big, disciplined shepherd with these deep, knowing hazel eyes. He was the real professional, the silent sentinel who could send a loose electrical wire from 50 yards, and who, frankly, usually made my job look like a pleasant stroll. It was about 10:30 a.m., peak traveler chaos, right near the main concourse where the ticket lines snake forever and the announcements echo off the high, vaulted ceilings. We were just doing our sweep, Zeus's nose working the air low to the ground, his tail doing that lazy, rhythmic sway that meant all was calm in his world. I remember thinking, another quiet shift, buddy. Maybe we'll get those new thermal pads for the kennel today. I was actually contemplating paperwork, a deep dive into the bureaucratic abyss, when it happened. Zeus froze. I mean, completely froze. 1 second he's moving with that easy, fluid gait. The next he's a statue, all 95 pounds of him rigid, ears pinned forward, head cocked just slightly, his front paws planted like solid granite. His entire focus, that deep, unwavering hazel gaze, locked onto a family about 20 yards ahead. It was a woman, mid-40s maybe, dressed in a sharp, almost aggressive crimson coat. Expensive, maybe a little too loud, pulling 2 teenage boys and a tiny little girl along. To the world, she was just a stressed, slightly overbearing mom, battling the morning rush, probably running late for the regional express. She looked composed, unnaturally composed. She moved with a strange, deliberate speed, like she was eager to just dissolve into the crowd, get beyond the security markers, and disappear into the next state. I whispered, pulling the leash taut, "What is it, boy? Gunpowder? That old chili powder smell again." Zeus didn't even twitch for me. He just held that stare, a low, almost imperceptible rumble starting in his chest, a sound I knew meant, danger is present, handler. This is not chili powder. Focus. I followed his eyes past the 2 older boys who looked bored, tapping on their phones, to the smallest one. She had this pale, heart-shaped face and light brown hair pulled back tight, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Let's call her Eliza. She was clutching the... Zeus let out a sharp, commanding bark, enough to make 100 people stop their conversations, look up from their phones, and turn, creating an instant circle of attention around us. The woman in the crimson coat flinched violently, spinning around, her forced smile back in place, but it was disastrously shaky at the edges, like badly applied plaster. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice smooth, maybe too smooth, a practice calm that violently contradicted the tremor in her hands. "Just a routine patrol, ma'am," I replied, my eyes flicking rapidly between her panicked face and Eliza. I tried to pull Zeus back. Control is everything in a public space. I was fighting my own protocol, but he was a statue of pure refusal, his paws refusing to budge on the polished floor. He took a step forward, his muscles tense, his focus radiating off him like heat, pulling me forward. The atmosphere just thickened, became electric, right there between the 3 of us. "Control your dog," she snapped, but her voice cracked on the final word, giving away the entire performance. I raised a hand, signaling the gathering crowd to stay back, my other hand instinctively hovering near my holster, pure professional habit, not threat. Then, in a moment of silence that followed Zeus's second, louder bark, Eliza looked at me. She wasn't scared of the dog. She looked relieved, and her lips moved, just barely, almost imperceptible above the persistent hum of the crowd, mouthing 2 simple words straight at me. "Help us." My breath seized in my chest. This wasn't a false alarm. This wasn't a rogue scent. This was a direct, silent plea, and my partner had heard it first. I looked down at the big German shepherd, his eyes blazing with a singular, terrifying purpose, and I knew what I had to do. My training screamed for caution, for backup, for protocol. But my gut and Zeus's sheer, unyielding conviction shouted louder. I took a steadying breath, looked Zeus straight in the eye, and whispered, "All right, partner, lead the way. Protocol is secondary to the life in front of us." I dropped the leash. I didn't actually let go, but I gave him the slack, the permission he needed. He surged forward, not attacking, not aggressive, but moving with a terrifying, controlled intent, stopping just inches from the woman, his body becoming an absolute, imposing wall of fur and loyalty. "Don't move. Stay where you are," I shouted, rushing forward to assert control, but keeping a safe, strategic distance. The woman froze, her eyes wide, the realization dawning on her that the routine stop had just become a dead end, a trap. "I don't understand," she insisted, her voice trembling, but now with real, corrosive panic. "Why is your dog doing this? We haven't done anything wrong. We're late for our train to New Haven." "My partner reacts for a reason, ma'am," I said, my voice rock steady, carrying the weight of the law, cutting through her panic. "And I've seen that look before. That look of forced control you just gave your daughter. No mother talks to her child like that when she's just afraid of a dog. No, that fear is hiding something deeper, something institutional." I took a slow step forward, cutting the distance between us. "I'm going to have to ask you to open your bag. Now." Her eyes darted everywhere. The crowd, the exits, my face. The performance was utterly gone now, replaced by a desperate calculus of escape. "What? Why? You have no right to search my belongings." "I haven't consented to a search," she spat, clutching her large black tote tighter across her chest, the leather strap cutting into her neck. Her knuckles were bone white, her hands pale and shaking uncontrollably. "Ma'am," I said, my tone gently authoritative but unyielding. It's standard procedure when a K-9 gives a hard alert. "If you have nothing to hide, it'll take 1 minute. Let's make this easy." For a fraction of a second, her facade shattered completely, the practiced smile replaced by raw, absolute desperation. Then, she made a reckless move. In one frantic motion, she spun, yanking Eliza behind her, trying to push through a small gap in the crowd near a magazine stand. Gasps erupted as people shouted. I yelled, "Zeus! Block! Contain!" He reacted instantly, a blur of gold and black. He cut off her path with a precision that only years of perfect training could produce. His bark was a thunderclap in the terminal, forcing her to stop dead. He wasn't aggressive, but he was an immovable barrier. I closed the distance, signaling to a nearby officer, Officer Ben Harrison, for immediate assistance. "Put it down," I said, my voice low and quiet, pure command. "Put the bag down now." She hesitated, her breathing shallow, her defiance dissolving into a desperate kind of surrender. "Please," she whispered, her voice fragile, cracking with defeat. "It's not what it looks like. You're making a mistake." "Then show me," I replied, unyielding. Zeus let out a low, guttural growl, a sound of absolute conviction. His instincts were screaming the truth. He kept his gaze locked between the bag and little Eliza, who was now trembling with a fearful relief behind the woman. Finally, her resistance cracked. Her hands trembled as she slowly lowered the bag onto a steel inspection table nearby. "There's nothing illegal in here," she murmured, defeat heavy in her voice, avoiding eye contact. "Please, we just want to go. You're ruining our schedule." I nodded to Ben. He slowly, deliberately, began unzipping the tote. The metallic sound of the zipper cutting through the suddenly silent terminal was deafening, drawing every eye and every camera phone in the vicinity. Zeus's nose hovered close, sniffing the material, his body tensing with heightened, razor-sharp awareness. At first, it was just ordinary stuff, clothes, snacks, a folded blanket. But tucked between the layers, Ben spotted a small metallic object wrapped in a child's woolen scarf. He pulled it out, a cheap prepaid phone, the back taped shut with black electrical tape. "No SIM card," Ben muttered. One-way communication. Zeus barked once, sharp and immediate, his attention fixed on the bottom compartment of the bag. I reached in, my hand brushing against something stiff. Papers. I pulled them out, a set of travel documents, multiple passports, several photo IDs. All with different names, different issue dates, but one horrifying constant face, the woman's. My jaw tightened. The realization of the scope of the operation hit me like a physical blow. "Ma'am," I said slowly, using the name I saw on the primary ID. "Would Victoria Lynn like to explain why she also holds valid-looking IDs for Dahlia Vance and Alice DuPont, all issued in different states over the last 6 months?" Her face drained of all color, turning a sickening, waxy gray. "It's not what you think, please. They made me do it. I have people I need to protect." Zeus growled again, louder, silencing her with pure, controlled sound. My eyes dropped to a small, unmarked manila envelope that had slipped from the pile of documents. I opened it cautiously. Inside were photographs, grainy, distant shots of various children, not just Eliza, taken like surveillance images. Gasps rippled through the immediate crowd. The woman, this Victoria Lynn, or whatever her real name was, lunged forward. "Give those back," she screamed, raw, animal panic flashing in her eyes. I stepped back instantly, shielding the evidence. "Enough," I commanded, firmly, my hand now resting lightly on my weapon. "Stay where you are." Eliza whimpered softly, her voice cracking as she whispered, looking up at me with pleading eyes. She said we were going on vacation to meet our dad. But they never came back, the other kids. My stomach turned cold. Ben and I exchanged a grave, silent look that needed no words. Zeus stood perfectly still, silent, watching, waiting. We knew the truth. This wasn't a misunderstanding, not a custody dispute, not a small lie. This was the opening scene of a massive, dark operation, and the 5 taps had just saved a life, maybe more. The moment Victoria Lynn's resistance crumbled, the Aviation Parkway terminal stopped being a busy transport hub and became a sealed crime scene. Yellow tape sectioned off the concourse. The sounds of travelers were replaced by the harsh, clipped voices of Metro detectives and the snap of evidence bags. Victoria Lynn, whose real name we soon confirmed was Marta Vogel, was on an active Interpol watch list across 3 continents. Not for common theft, but for organized child trafficking and exploitation. The multiple high-quality IDs, the prepaid phones, the surveillance-style photos, all pointed to a highly structured, systemic operation. I stood by the security office, the quiet hum of the heating vents the only continuous sound, watching the lead investigator, Detective Harding, a seasoned veteran who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, close his evidence file with a decisive snap. He looked down at Zeus, who was resting his head on my boot, still fully alert, his eyes tracking the shadows. "Donovan," Harding said, his voice flat with grim exhaustion. "You and that dog. You just intercepted a major logistics point. If she'd boarded that train, if she'd reached New Haven, we might have lost the trail completely." They moved like fluid, covering their tracks instantly. I knelt, rubbing Zeus's ears, feeling the solid certainty of his body against my leg. He knew, Detective. He knew she wasn't safe the second he laid eyes on her. It wasn't the odor of guilt. It was the scent of pure, unadulterated fear on that little girl. Zeus responded with a slow blink, his eyes steady, certain, unshaken. He was confirming the instinct, not seeking praise. He didn't need words. The 5 taps had told him everything. But the case wasn't closed. Harding pointed to a large, dynamic digital map of the city that a forensic technician had just projected onto the wall, highlighting various warehouses and transport depots. The network is in chaos. They know Marta is gone. They're panicking, trying to shift the rest of the kids tonight. We got lucky. The phone data we pulled from her disposable burner just pinged a rendezvous point, a secondary staging area near the old industrial zone. Red pins clustered around the Ashfield Yards, a huge, derelict factory site known for its winding, confusing layout and terrible sight lines. They think they have maybe 2 hours before we can get a warrant and mobilize. I clench my fists, the leather of my glove squeaking under the pressure. The thought of those other kids, the ones in the grainy photos, trapped, scared, waiting for a promised vacation that would only lead to a nightmare, it fueled a cold, sharp anger in my chest. Then we don't have 2 hours, Detective. We need to move. Now. We move in 10. The commander barked, his voice echoing in the impromptu command center, cutting through the tension. Bring the K9 unit. We need eyes, speed, and scent, and Zeus has the scent trail now. The convoy, a dozen unmarked sedans and 2 black tactical vans, rolled out into the dark, damp night, cutting through the dense city fog. Inside the lead vehicle, my hand never left Zeus's vest, the Kevlar material rough under my fingers. You ready, buddy? Time to finish what we started. Those 5 taps, they were for all of them. He let out a low, focused whine, his body vibrating with the controlled energy of a coiled spring. He wasn't afraid. He was driven by a primal need for correction. We arrived at the Ashfield Yards, a nightmare landscape of massive, empty brick warehouses, broken glass, and an oppressive silence that felt heavy and utterly wrong. The GPS signal had stopped near the center of this desolate complex. We fanned out in absolute silence, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing the darkness, moving from cover to cover, navigating the rubble and abandoned equipment. I unclipped Zeus's leash, but kept the collar. Find them, Zeus, I murmured, my voice. You're safe now. I managed, my voice thick with relief and anger. You're all safe. We're getting you out of here. Zeus, the powerful K9, approached slowly, his tail lowered in calm assurance, his entire posture projecting protection, not aggression. The children's fear melted, replaced by wide-eyed awe. One tiny girl reached out a trembling hand, touching his fur. He found us, the 9-year-old boy whispered, staring at Zeus. I couldn't help but smile faintly, a lump forming in my throat. Yeah, I said quietly. He always finds who he's looking for. But the night wasn't over. As the first officers began wrapping blankets around the children, a sound cut through the radio traffic, a car engine starting close by. I spun toward the far side of the warehouse perimeter. Headlights flared to life in the oppressive dark. A black, high-performance sedan, sleek and fast, roared down the narrow, rubble-strewn service road. They're making a run for it. The driver, the logistics coordinator, and officer shouted. Go, Zeus. Intercept. Stop that vehicle. I yelled, the adrenaline surging back, wiping out the momentary relief. Zeus needed no further instruction. He was gone, a controlled blur of gold and black, a missile of loyalty and muscle. He cut across the uneven ground, weaving through rusty pylons, closing the distance with terrifying, calculated precision. The driver, clearly panicked by the sirens and flashlights, was dangerously fast, spinning around a blind corner too hard, nearly broadsiding an abandoned forklift. Zeus didn't flinch. He cleared the obstacle, gaining ground rapidly. I screamed into my radio. Suspect vehicle heading south on the river road. K9 pursuit engaged. Request backup at the old drawbridge. The driver, a clean-cut man in a suit, slammed the accelerator, reaching for top speed on the broken asphalt. But Zeus was pure, focused velocity, driven by that single, burning purpose. With a final, explosive burst of power, he leapt, his jaws catching the thick material of the driver's blazer through the open passenger window. The man shrieked, wrenching the wheel away from the dog. The sedan spun violently, fishtailing across the road before crashing sideways, its momentum absorbed by a massive, reinforced steel support beam. The engine sputtered, steam hissing from the wreckage. I reached them, gun drawn, my lungs burning, the taste of rust and dust sharp in my mouth. Police! Don't move. Hands where I can see them. The driver, clutching his arm, stumbled out, his expensive suit ripped and smeared with oil. Atlas stood between us, growling, controlled, protective, an absolute embodiment of unrelenting, silent justice. As I restrained the man, he stared at me, his eyes cold and calculating even in defeat. You think you've won, officer? You got 2 pawns. This organization is global. You just delayed the shipment, that's all. Maybe, I said, cold fury chilling my voice as the cuffs clicked shut with finality. But you won't be making the next one. And we know every delay saves a life. His sneer faded into stark terror when Zeus stepped forward, eyes locked on him, the physical manifestation of the consequence he'd just run from. The storm was finally over. By dawn, the city was quiet again. The Ashfield Yards was sealed off. The rescued children were safely at a local trauma center, wrapped in warm blankets, receiving care. I was standing near the entrance when I saw them, a rush of motion and emotion that transcended the exhaustion. A man and woman, their faces etched with weeks of fear, now dissolving into tears, escorted by Detective Harding. Eliza's real parents. "Mom! Dad!" she cried, her little voice the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The reunion was instantaneous, a tight, desperate, healing embrace that made every cop nearby look away, swallowing hard. Eliza eventually broke away from her parents and ran straight to Zeus. She knelt, burying her face in his big, warm, slightly damp fur. The German shepherd remained perfectly still, a pillar of calm, only his tail thumping lightly against the concrete. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled in his coat. "You're my hero, Zeus. You heard the taps when no one else could." I blinked back the burn in my eyes, placing a hand on Zeus's broad shoulder. "He hears that, kiddo," I said softly, my voice tight. "He always does. He listened to your courage." Later, as Eliza and her family prepared to drive off into the healing morning light, she held something small in her hand. Zeus's old, bronze K9 badge tag, which I'd quietly passed to her father. She knelt beside him one last time, smiling through her tears. "I'm going to keep this," she said, "so I never forget you or the taps." "You don't have to forget," I told her, my voice gentle. "He's part of your story now, and you're absolutely part of his." I watched them drive away, the early morning sun catching the light brown of Eliza's hair. I looked down at my partner, who leaned his heavy head against my leg. A simple gesture that confirmed the job was complete, but the vigil was ongoing. "You don't just protect lives, buddy," I whispered, the wind carrying my voice. "You change them. You give them back their future. You know, the old saying is that a dog is man's best friend." But that day, Zeus showed me he was something more profound. He was an uncompromising listener. He heard the 5 soft taps, a cry for help that was never spoken, never loud, never demanding. And he refused to let the chaos of the world ignore it. He didn't need badges or complex satellite data. He just needed the fierce, pure loyalty to trust his own instinct and the willingness to act on the sound of silence. And that, right there, is the greatest kind of hero you could ever hope to meet. Now, I have to ask you, how often do you think we miss the 5 taps in our own lives? The silent signals? The moments when someone around us, maybe a neighbor fighting a secret battle, a colleague struggling with deep burnout, or even a kid in a public transit line, is screaming for help but can't make a sound because the danger is too close, the stakes too high, or the fear too immense. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think we rely too much on hearing the words, on the noise and the obvious, and not nearly enough on trusting our instincts and paying attention to the silence? And what responsibility does the community have to look closer at the subtle cues? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear Zeus's story of silent bravery, and subscribe for more true tales of courage, loyalty, and the power of listening. We've all got to listen better, don't we?